What can I do for you, Inspector?
The resale price of your shares to your boss seems pretty ridiculous, Nolan. It seems like some kind of arrangement between you both. Tell me if I'm mistaken.
The truth is that I am very indebted to Walter Jones in many spheres. Therefore, I voluntarily helped him by ceding him my shares at a moderate price. It was in order to strengthen Walter's position in his own firm in light of the merger with the company World Cement. A plan that was essential for Walter and his family, you understand? How could I not have helped him, Inspector?
This document is crushing, Nolan. What do you have to say in your defense?
Crushing? You're going too far, Inspector. I'm not going to pretend to be a professor of financial economics, but I do know that the CWPF received very handsome dividends, whereas my company suffered terrible setbacks in the financial markets. And I'll add that if the Construction Workers' Pension Fund had really wanted to secure its investments, it ought to have invested in Treasury bonds. The fund couldn't have been ignorant about that. The real victim is not the one we suspect, Inspector.
These documents attest that you had an accomplice and that you personally benefited at the expense of the employees of World Cement by using the company high placement, which you then got rid of. The collection of these proofs could be a very good motive for killing Walter Jones.
Wait a second, Inspector. I willingly acknowledge that I helped my niece find a job. She's a brilliant young girl, and it was unacceptable that she was on unemployment. As for this so-called financial embezzlement, I only paid myself for the worth of my work and my expertise. That doesn't make me a murderer.
Stop making fun of me, Nolan. I'm beginning to see clearly through your petty skullduggery. You're going to respond to all of this in front of the court. Be sure of that.
I know the law well, and I know my rights, Inspector. I therefore refuse to continue this interrogation with you. I've nothing more to say to you in this regard.
This transfer of shares reimburses Walter Jones to the penny, the money you embezzled, Mr. Nolan.
I have to confess that the facts are against me. I had a long meeting with Walter Jones at the end of the afternoon on the very day of his death, Inspector. Walter was distrustful of everything, myself included. He had financed an investigation of my account, and he discovered what you know. Walter threatened to expose me to the courts. He had me, well and good. The old fox. He demanded that I retroactively transfer my shares in the Jones Company. Well, I drew up the paperwork for the transfer at the end of the afternoon. Walter and I were to have signed it after dinner.
Nolan, you had good reason to get rid of Walter Jones. I'm wondering under what circumstances these confessions could have been extracted.
I won't deny that that is my signature. But you should know, Inspector, that these confessions were extracted from me by blackmail. And obviously without any witness, they therefore have no legal value. Inspector Norm, I know that appearances are against me, but I can assure you that I am no murderer.
Sonia told me that you had advised her to put Walter Jones under psychiatric care?
I acknowledge this without shame, Inspector. I supported the steps taken by Walter's grandchildren in the interests of the entire Jones family. I didn't understand Walter's unjustified distrust of his grandchildren, and I feared that he was beginning to be scared. But I insist on the fact that I'm not the one who initiated the procedure. Martin was the first to contact me about this.
Okay, and supposing I believe you used the rifle as binoculars and not as a weapon, who could have taken the rifle after you and shot Walter Jones?
I didn't run into anyone when I left my office. I'm the only one left in the tower who has a key card to enter this office. I don't understand how Walter Jones could have been killed by this rifle. Please, believe me.
I'll take note of it. I need a key. I need a key. I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
You want my fingerprints, Jack. It's amusing. But it's also very messy, Jack.
Thanks. Henceforth, I have a mandate and I represent the law. So no more evasive responses. What did Walter Jones tell you regarding his estate?
Marco doesn't tell me everything, you know. He still keeps some small secrets from me.
The autopsy is categorical. Walter Jones died from a bullet wound in his back, and not as a result of his fall from the Tortoise Belvedere. With all the doubts stemming from the circumstances, Baena has nothing to do with the death. Nevertheless, I would love to have your point of view on this.
One way or another, Jones is dead, Jack. For me, it changes nothing. For little Baena, it's different, of course. She is less guilty than before.
What were you doing at the hour of the crime, around 11 p.m.?
I played poker with Billy and Martin all evening. Then I left to go to sleep and found Marco already asleep. It must have been between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. Sonia was very hostile to me because she didn't like seeing me playing and chatting with Martin. At one point she went out to calm down.
If the heirs had thought of inheriting, it seems they're off to a rather rocky start. What do you think?
This man detested me, Jack, and I didn't love him either. He wanted me to leave. Marco didn't want to leave me, so Walter Jones made him pay. There, you have it all.
What did you get in return for rescinding that Walter Jones be put under psychiatric care?
Ask Marco. He knows better than me. It's his family's affair. You understand.
I get the impression that Walter Jones didn't particularly appreciate you. Am I mistaken?
I'll tell you a story, Jack. One evening in Houston, as I was leaving the movie theater, I was attacked by a man. He hit me and slashed my face. It was one of Walter Jones's hitmen, I am sure of it. The guy said, "Go away, you dirty communist slut. Go back home to Russia. It's the last warning. You understand that, you bitch? Next time you'll be dead." And he stuck his knife into my cheek. Of course, it was the old goat Jones who wanted to intimidate me, to force me to leave Marco. He thought that it would injure his political career if I was seen around him.
If I may permit myself, Christina, I believe that Jones was unfair to you. Do you believe that you can get your hands on at least a small piece of the estate now that he's dead?
I am not an heir. And then, Marco and I, we are not yet married. If you know of a formula that would allow me to have this old jerk's money, then you have to let me know right away, Jack.
Sorry, I don't know. Do you think Walter Jones's fears about you were justified, miss?
Maybe. I don't know, Jack. There are people who like me and others who don't. But Marco was ready to leave politics because of his love for me. He told me this often.
Christina, this page from Jones's diary about the assault on you seems totally like a confession to me. What do you think?
Of course it doesn't surprise me. Walter Jones didn't have the courage to do the dirty work himself. I was beaten and given a death threat by a hired hand because the son of a bitch wanted to force me to leave Marco because he's a Republican candidate and I wasn't a woman suited to a future senator. Jack, life was not always easy for me. When I lived in Russia, it was sometimes really hard. So, it doesn't really frighten me to have the blade of a knife pointed at me, understand? I would have loved to kill this pig of a Jones myself. Yes, I regret it.
Did Walter Jones wear this chain around his neck?
I don't know, Jack. Really.
Do you know if Walter Jones was wearing something around his neck on the night of his death?
I don't know, Jack.
Did you see anyone in the library the evening of the murder?
Oh, Jack. Marco and I were very busy. You understand what I'm trying to say, don't you? Our room doesn't have a view on the library, so in any case, we would not have noticed anyone there.
I get it. Marco and Christina came directly to the island after their break in Moscow.
Your questions are splendid. Continue. I love this.
In our times, it's wise to go out with men who use precaution. Who is the last man who had the honor of using this prophylactic in the tower?
It's my private life, Jack. And moreover, condoms are not a misdemeanor, I think. Quite to the contrary.
I'm sure I'll be back to ask for clarifications.
Jack, I can't believe this. I've left like 15 messages. You're going to think I'm crazy. But I'm waiting for you at the restaurant. I mean, you know how hard it was to get these reservations? Jack?
Don't hang up, please. I'll get more privacy to talk to you. It's going to be longer than I had hoped, my beautiful. The inquiry is a little complicated.
I mean, where are you? I don't understand what's going on. I've been calling you. I left. I drove. I had to take the car over, and I had to have the whole oil thing. And I got to tell you about that because this bill is just crazy. You won't believe how much he's trying to dig us for.
Listen, the fellow was killed by a bullet, and as a result, I've got almost 10 suspects on my hands. I'm doing my best and my quickest, my beautiful. Yes, I promise you, I'm thinking of you. Of course, I love you. I will certainly be able to use this for something. This suitcase is closed. Long live the old-fashioned methods.
Correct match.
This suitcase is closed. This suitcase is closed.
You can simper, my beautiful. I'm not buying into it. I know very well that you can speak. You're playing mute to soften up Lorenzo, but I'm not blind. I see that you're running after him. My poor girl. But Lorenzo only feels pity for you. Do you understand that? You hoped that you could hoodwink the cop, but not me. I know very well that you're the murderer, because it wasn't enough for you to push an old man in a wheelchair into the void. You had to finish him off by pulling the trigger. And now you think you can mooch off Lorenzo. You have your head in the clouds, my poor girl. You'll end up in the ditch. That's what will happen. Bitch, you'll pay me back for that. I'm all yours, Inspector Norm. I mean, in a manner of speaking.
Tell me what this object was doing in your suite.
Okay, Mr. Norm, I'll tell you everything. Around 11:30 p.m., Billy and I went down to go in search of our grandfather. We headed toward the elevator, and who did we see coming looking appalling, dirty, and soaked from head to toe? Herbert de Nolant in person. He furtively took the elevator. The indicator light told us that he stopped at the floor where my grandfather's apartment was. I told Billy I found this odd. So we took the elevator and followed Nolant. When we got off, we followed his muddy tracks all the way to my grandfather's room, where we found the jerk rummaging through grandfather's safe. He was examining objects of the marriage ceremony that my batty grandfather had wanted to celebrate with that little slut of the island. Indeed, at that moment, I didn't yet know what Nolant had in his hands, but I pounced on him for an explanation, as you might suspect, Inspector. And he launched into smoky explanations while wriggling around like someone who was far from having a clean conscience. With all I saw, I didn't hesitate for a second, Mr. Norm. I tore the items that belonged to my grandfather from Nolant's hands, and I cleared out with Billy. Billy doesn't always have a clear head, especially after a certain point in the day, so I hid these items in my own things. I was sure that they would be safe there.
The speech suggests the existence of a note explaining how access to the chapel was possible. You haven't put it aside by chance, have you?
An explanatory note explaining how to access the chapel, really? I don't remember it. Don't look at me like that, Mr. Norm. Well, it's true that I found a vague drawing for opening the altar of the chapel. A drawing that I hastened to destroy, as you can well imagine. With such a document, Baina would have opened the altar. She would have recovered her repugnant marriage act, which deprived us of our inheritance. That's all that could be missing, that I myself helped this little slut from the island to cheat us.
I heard that there's a chapel somewhere. Do you know where it is?
I have absolutely no idea. I know about its existence only since I read my grandfather's awful speech.
What do these inscriptions mean?
You're lucky, Mr. Norm. I have a doctorate in archaeology, and as it turns out, I'm pretty interested in this region and its culture. My grandfather suggested I study the dialect of the archipelago, and in particular the Maledivian of Segura. Let's see, Inspector. This tortoise that you are holding is a ritual object that recalls the customary law, and that holds wedding rings. The inscription that is marked is literally translated as, "The earth, the fruits, and all the island holds on its back belong to the first tribe and to all its children." This clearly shows that foreigners cannot possess anything on the island. This includes the house that they had intended to construct. Nothing can belong to them on this island. I will translate the remainder for you. To unite with a son or a daughter of the first tribe, the foreigner will give all that he or she possesses. That which is given to Segura is never taken back. This is very clear, Inspector. All the primitive matrimonial and patrimonial rights of the islands are summarized here. You undoubtedly noticed that my grandfather had another ritual inscription translated in his marriage speech. This inscription lays out what is legally entailed by a marriage between a foreigner and a native of the island. It's an incredible mechanism of exploitation. You give everything to the girl from the corner who you marry, and too bad for the heirs. This tribal skullduggery almost wiped out our most legitimate rights, Mr. Norm.
All this is very instructive.